Ethan had always believed in loyalty. He believed in friendship that lasted, in people who stood by each other through thick and thin. Adrian had been that person, or so Ethan thought. They met years ago at a tech conference, two ambitious young men with dreams bigger than their wallets. They shared ideas, late-night brainstorming sessions, and small victories that kept them motivated. Adrian had been the friend who laughed at Ethan's bad jokes, who celebrated every small success as if it were his own. They weren't just partners in work, they were companions in life, trusting the other without question. That trust shattered on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day when nothing seems out of place. Ethan had noticed it first with a small detail: Adrian's unusual secrecy over their project files. He thought nothing of it at first. Everyone had their moments, their little lapses. But then came the texts Adrian tried to hide. The late-night phone calls that stopped when Ethan entered the room. The vague excuses that felt like cracks in a glass, too fragile to ignore. Ethan tried to reason with himself. Maybe he was imagining things. Maybe Adrian had a private problem he didn't want to share. But deep down, he felt the weight of something wrong pressing against his chest. The moment of truth came when Ethan stumbled across an email. He had access to the company's server for routine checks, and what he saw made the air leave his lungs. Adrian had submitted their startup Ideathin's idea, the one he had labored over for years, to a competitor. Not as a partnership, not with credit, but as if he had thought of it himself. Every line of code, every innovative concept, every strategy Ethan had spent sleepless nights crafting, stolen and sold. The betrayal was immediate, sharp and suffocating. Ethan's first reaction was disbelief. He stared at the screen, unable to move, unable to breathe. Could someone really betray you so completely? Someone you trusted with your dreams, your secrets, your failures, and your successes? He felt dizzy, his vision blurred, his mind refusing to process what had happened. Then the anger came. It started as a low hum, a simmering pulse at the edge of his consciousness. But it grew rapidly, boiling over into every thought. He imagined confronting Adrian, hearing him lie, watching him squirm under the weight of his actions. More than that, he imagined reclaiming what was his, making Adrian understand the pain he had caused. Yet alongside the rage, a strange numbness took hold. Ethan felt hollowed out, as if the betrayal had emptied him of something essential. It wasn't just the loss of a business idea or potential wealth, it was the loss of trust. The realization that someone he considered family could see him as a stepping stone. That understanding gnawed at him more than any financial loss could. He wandered through the day in a haze, replaying memories, conversations, and laughter, searching for signs, any clue that he had missed. But nothing explained it. Adrian's betrayal was deliberate, calculated, and personal. Ethan's world changed overnight. Meetings that had once been exciting became reminders of what he had lost. Emails, texts, and news feeds that once brought joy now served as triggers, reminding him that Adrian was enjoying the rewards of his work while Ethan was left to pick up the pieces. Friends and family tried to comfort him, but words felt hollow. They didn't understand the depth of the wound, the betrayal of someone so close. Someone trusted implicitly, someone whose approval had meant everything. As the days passed, Ethan's grief transformed into a single consuming thought: revenge. He didn't just want justice. He wanted to feel the power he had lost, to reclaim the dignity stolen from him. He imagined ways to expose Adrian, to humiliate him, to make the world see the truth. But even as these thoughts raced through his mind, he sensed the danger. Revenge was tempting, intoxicating, but it could consume him. Could he really risk becoming what he despised, driven solely by anger and spite? Could he take the moral high ground, or would the fire of betrayal burn too brightly to resist? Ethan couldn't sleep. He replayed every conversation, every shared project, every laugh, and every promise. The betrayal wasn't just in the act, it was in the subtle signs he had missed. The moments of manipulation that now looked obvious in hindsight. He felt a mixture of sorrow, regret, and fury. Adrian's actions had not only stolen an idea, they had rewritten the rules of their friendship. Nothing would ever be the same, and yet amid the storm of emotions, a quiet determination began to form. Ethan realized that he couldn't change the past, but he could control his next steps. He could choose how to respond. The betrayal had awakened a fire, a need not just for revenge, but for understanding, for clarity, for reclaiming control over his life. The path ahead was uncertain, dangerous in its own way. Aiden knew the choices he made now would define not just the outcome, but who he would become. The first part of Ethan's journey ended not with action, but with resolution. He would face this betrayal. He would confront the loss, the anger, and the moral dilemma. And somewhere beneath the pain, beneath the desire for payback, he hoped to find a path forward, one that might restore not only what was taken from him, but the sense of self that had been shaken to its core. After the betrayal, Ethan's days became restless and sleepless. Every morning he woke with a tight knot in his chest, thinking about Adrian and the stolen idea. His mind was a battlefield, filled with anger, hurt, and a gnawing need for justice. He couldn't focus at work, couldn't enjoy simple things, and even small tasks felt meaningless. The world seemed to mock him with reminders of Adrian's success. Social media posts showed Adrian smiling, speaking at conferences, being praised for what Ethan had created. Every photo, every headline, every congratulatory comment fueled the fire inside him. Ethan began to obsess over the betrayal. He scrutinized every interaction he had with Adrian in the past, replaying conversations and meetings. He asked himself over and over, how did I miss it? Was I too trusting? Could I have stopped this? The answers didn't come. Each realization of Adrian's deceit added layers to his frustration. Yet amid the anger, a part of him noticed the complexity in Adrian's actions. Maybe it wasn't just greed. Maybe fear had pushed him. Maybe jealousy, insecurity, or the pressure to succeed had led Adrian to make a terrible choice. This thought didn't lessen Ethan's anger, but it complicated it, creating a confusing mix of emotions he couldn't untangle. With his mind consumed, Ethan began planning. He didn't rush, he observed. He noted Adrian's routines, the way he presented himself in meetings, the people who admired him, and the flaws in his carefully constructed image. Ethan wanted revenge, but he wanted it precise, meaningful, and undeniable. He imagined confronting Adrian publicly, exposing the truth with evidence that could not be denied. He pictured Adrian's shock, the sudden silence as others realized the betrayal, and the satisfaction that his own integrity would shine in contrast. Yet, as the plans grew more detailed, Ethan noticed the toll it was taking on him. Obsession made his life smaller. Friends who called were ignored. Family who reached out were brushed aside. Meals were skipped. Nights were spent drafting emails in his head, imagining confrontations, and rehearsing arguments that might never happen. Every time he felt a spark of satisfaction at imagining Adrian's downfall, it was followed by exhaustion, guilt, and a strange emptiness. Ethan realized revenge, while tempting, was starting to feel like a trap. He experimented with smaller actions first. Subtle reminders, quiet questions to investors, gentle nudges that could reveal discrepancies. Each attempt gave him a mix of thrill and hesitation. Seeing Adrian flinch at a pointed comment or noticing confusion in his confident smile sparked a sense of control. For a moment, it felt like justice. But even these small victories left Ethan hollow. He realized revenge was not simple. It wasn't the satisfying, clean triumph he had imagined. It was messy, consuming, and dangerous. At the same time, Ethan began questioning himself. Was he becoming someone he didn't recognize? He had always valued honesty, patience, and hard work now. He was plotting deception and manipulation. He saw a reflection of Adrian in himself, and it scared him. The line between right and wrong blurred. He understood that he could destroy Adrian's reputation, but at what cost? Truly heal his wound, or would it only deepen it, leaving both of them broken? Ethan also considered Adrian's perspective. He imagined the pressure Adrian must have felt, the fear of failure, the need to prove himself. While these thoughts didn't excuse the betrayal, they humanized Adrian in Ethan's eyes. Revenge now felt complicated. It wasn't just about punishment, it was about ethics, about whether he could allow anger to dictate his actions. Every plan, every imagined confrontation was now weighed against the moral question. Am I better than this, or am I letting the betrayal define me? Days turned into weeks, and Ethan's internal struggle intensified. His mind was like a storm, full of competing thoughts, emotions, and impulses. He knew he could strike at any moment, that the opportunity to expose Adrian could present itself. Tomorrow or the day after. But he also knew that acting too soon, without clarity, could ruin him as much as it could ruin Adrian. The suspense became unbearable, and every decision, no matter how small, felt critical. Through all this, Ethan realized he was not only fighting Adrian, he was fighting himself. He wrestled with the need for vengeance, the desire for justice, and the fear of losing his own moral compass. Every night, he stared at the ceiling, imagining the confrontation, imagining the release of anger, imagining the relief of seeing Adrian exposed. And yet, every morning, the fire returned, sharper and more consuming. As he questioned whether revenge would truly bring the peace he craved, by the end of the struggle, Ethan knew one thing. The choice he made next would define him. The path of revenge was clear, tempting, and dangerous. But there was also another path, a path of self-control, patience, and rebuilding his life without being consumed by bitterness. The decision loomed ahead, a critical moment that could change everything. Ethan had prepared, observed, and planned. Now, he had to face the question that haunted him. Will revenge bring satisfaction, or will it destroy me as much as it could destroy him? The storm inside him hadn't settled yet. The plan for action was in his mind, sharp and detailed. But so was the voice of caution. Ethan's struggle was far from over. He had the evidence, the opportunity, and the desire. The next step would define not just the outcome of the betrayal, but the very core of who he was. The night arrived with a heavy, electric tension. Ethan had everything prepared. The emails, the proof, the witnesses he could call if necessary. He had rehearsed the confrontation countless times in his mind, imagined Adrian's shock, the gasps, the sudden silence, the satisfaction of seeing justice done. Every detail of the plan was precise. This was the moment he had waited for, the moment that could deliver revenge in full measure. He sat at his desk, staring at the screen, fingers hovering over the send button. The proof glared back at him, evidence that could not be denied. Adrian's betrayal, exposed to the world. One click and years of deception would collapse in front of everyone who had ever believed in him. Ethan could almost hear the whispers, feel the eyes turning toward Adrian, see the shock on his face. It was intoxicating, almost unreal. But then, a quiet thought cut through the storm of his anticipation. And then what? What would happen after Adrian's reputation crumbled? Would it restore Ethan's sense of peace, or would it leave a hollow satisfaction, a bitter taste that wouldn't go away? He thought about the hours he had spent obsessing, the nights without sleep, the days when he ignored friends and family. He realized that revenge had already taken much from him. It had consumed his energy, his thoughts, and his calm. Could he really trade that for a fleeting victory over Adrian? Ethan leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. He imagined Adrian, not just as a betrayer, but as a human being. The fear, the ambition, the desperation that had pushed him to make a terrible choice. Adrian was proud, clever, manipulative, but he was also flawed, just like everyone else. And in exposing him, Ethan would be creating more pain, more anger, more chaos. But he would win the battle, yes. But what about the war inside himself? Would he feel relief? Or would he simply feel emptier, knowing he had allowed bitterness to define him? The hours passed in a tense blur. Ethan's finger twitched over the mouse, the temptation stronger than ever. Part of him screamed to act, to unleash the carefully stored evidence, to finally claim the justice he deserved. Every scenario he imagined felt perfect in execution, every imagined reaction from Adrian satisfying. Yet, in the back of his mind, another voice whispered, calm and steady, reminding him that actions have consequences, that anger has a way of backfiring, that revenge often changes the avenger more than the target. He thought about his own life, dreams that had been delayed, the opportunities he had missed while obsessing over Adrian's betrayal. He thought about his friends who reached out but were pushed away, his family who worried while he remained locked in a world of plans and schemes. The realization hit him like a jolt. Revenge might destroy what little peace and happiness he still had left. Could he afford that? Could he risk becoming someone he didn't even recognize? Ethan closed his eyes and took a deep breath. In that moment, he pictured the alternative, not revenge, not exposure, not humiliation, but a focus on himself, on rebuilding his ideas, on trusting his own skills, on creating something new that no one could steal or corrupt. Adrian's betrayal was real, yes, but it didn't have to define Ethan's future. The thought was simple, yet revolutionary. He could rise above the betrayal, reclaim his life, and refuse to let anger dictate his actions. His fingers moved not to send the email, but to delete it. One by one, he cleared the evidence from the drafts, moved the files into a private folder, and shut his laptop. The sense of temptation remained, but it lost its power. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt a strange calm. It wasn't triumph or victory, it was something better: control over himself, over his emotions, over his future. He had chosen a path that preserved his integrity, that kept him whole rather than hollowed out by vengeance. In the following days, Ethan threw himself into rebuilding. He started new projects, reaching out to collaborators who respected him, focusing on ideas that were entirely his own. He watched Adrian from a distance, noting the success and recognition he still received, but it no longer mattered. The satisfaction Ethan felt now came not from punishing someone else, but from reclaiming his energy, his creativity, and his life. He realized that revenge might provide a momentary thrill, but it could never replace the quiet, lasting power of personal growth and resilience. By stepping back, Ethan also discovered a deeper understanding of human nature. People make mistakes. People betray. Sometimes they are driven by fear, greed, or ambition. But holding on to bitterness only prolongs suffering. By choosing to rise above, Ethan transformed the story of betrayal into a story of strength. He didn't erase the past, but he refused to be trapped by it. Months later, Ethan would reflect. On that pivotal night, the night he could have destroyed Adrian, but didn't. He realized that in letting go, he had gained something far more valuable than revenge: freedom. Freedom from obsession, freedom from anger, and freedom to shape his own future. And in that freedom, Ethan finally felt the satisfaction he had been seeking all along. Not from punishing another, but from reclaiming his own life and peace of mind. The story of betrayal ended not with destruction, but with quiet triumph. Ethan learned that revenge might tempt, but it rarely heals. True power comes from choosing how to respond, from mastering oneself, and from transforming pain into resilience. In that choice, he found a satisfaction that no act of revenge could ever provide.